Liam, there's a lot to get through, and some of this is quite disturbing. Some of it's is quite surprising, obviously, and a lot of it we haven't heard before. So, um, today we were, I suppose, concentrating, at least in the beginning of the day, on people who live in this area of North Belfast, in the vicinity of which Noah's remains were ultimately found.
Mhm. And I suppose today we began by feeling that we were going to get a number of witnesses from the Northwood Road area. In the end, we got two, because their evidence was so lengthy and it took quite a length of time to get through. So we had two. We had, first of all, Karen Crooks. She's a resident from the Northwood Road area. She lives close to the cul-de-sac where Noah's bike was ultimately found. She, in her statement, it was read into evidence by Peter Call Casey. Miss Crooks said she had been at home on Northwood Road on the evening Noah disappeared. She said she noticed a bike that was left at the back of her car. She was on the street, or it was on the street, with the wheel pointing upwards. At around 7:45 p.m, she then went out, lifted the bike and set it by the wall. And when she came back from work at around 5 p.m. on Monday, the following Monday, June 22nd, she said she found it in the same position. She then went to take a picture of it to put it on Facebook to see if she could trace the owner of that bike. But before she could actually do that, she noticed the police appealed for information and realised immediately that the description of the bike that the police gave matched the one in her driveway. And at that point, then she contacted police.
She also described the culvert, and Noah's body was found around a kilometre, I suppose, up the pipe, which was fronted by this culvert. She said that her 5-year-old son was able to access this culvert. She described it and its position.
She did. She had a kind of extensive knowledge of the area. It was clarified through Brenda Campbell Casey, on behalf of Noah Donohoe. She'd asked Miss Crooks how long she lived in the area, and she said that the house had been in the family since 1980. So she had spent her childhood there, and her own children played there. Now, what she described was there was a side gate at the side of her house that led into a kind of open area around the back, which we know is part of the Northwood Linear Park, which is where the entrance to the culvert is. There was a small plank placed across the stream that led into the culvert that had been carried out by her father. So she really knew the area very well. It's out the back of her house. There are other houses on the street which lead out into that park as well. And the inquest heard evidence that they had kind of similar things in place for getting across the stream, and pictures of that were shown to the jury today. So in terms of the storm drain itself, the inquest heard it could only be accessed through a lock gate or through the nearby homes. They mentioned a fence that ran right around. It was a 1.8 metre fence, which is what we were told by Nyasa Murnahan, KC, for DFI. She was able to give specific measurement of that fence. So it was the whole way around the perimeter, but you could access it through the residencies on Northwood Road. Miss Murnahan, she took Miss Crooks through some of the photos around her home. She said the only way to access the area was through a locked gate for which DFI Rivers had a key. And the only other way of accessing the area is to trespass through your house or that of a neighbour, is what Ms. Murnahan said.
And Miss Crooks also said that she assumed that the access, she had assumed that the access hatch to this culvert was padlocked. It wasn't. And she was...
There is a reason for that, and Ms. Murnahan made that clear. She mentioned that if someone had, maybe got into the culvert and there was a strength of flood water coming through and they couldn't get out, the hatch was there and it was designed to be opened to allow that person to escape if they needed to. And that's the kind of clarification she gave as to why it didn't have a padlock.
That's an important clarification. And it's described. Now, I did say that Miss Crooks revealed that her 5-year-old son had been able to access the culvert. That doesn't mean that he did. That means that she was now aware of that, and that she was asked whether it was her personal knowledge that there was a massive drop down into the culvert, and she said that she wasn't aware of that.
No, her 5-year-old son did in fact tell her that he had accessed it at one point, because she said the children would often go out the back to play, and the jury's attention was drawn to a number of media articles at the time, in BBC Evening Extra. There was one, the Irish News, one of the Belfast Telegraph, where Ms. Crooks had given interviews about the storm drain and the access to it, and in one of those she revealed her 5-year-old had been able to access it. She then said she'd now locked the gate to the garden because obviously it was a danger to them, was what she said. And within that interview, as you say, she described a massive drop in the culvert, and Ms. Murnahan then pressed her on the depth of the stream leading into it. She said it was ankle deep. Then she was asked if she would accept there was sometimes a greater volume of water. Miss Crooks agreed. Pictures of the debris screen, and that's the language that the DFI councils have described the entrance to the culvert as the debris screen, to obviously screen out any debris that was carried by the floodwater. She was asked by Ms. Murnan whether her son would be able to come back out through the bars in the debris screen, and she said, I imagine he walked in and out of the bars. Again, Mr. Justice Rooney then intervened. He pressed Miss Crooks on whether she had seen the access hatch had been padlocked. She said she just assumed. Ms. Murnan, as we say, pointed out there wasn't a padlock on it and gave the good reasons for that.
Now, it was Miss Crooks. She was aware of the bike. She saw on social media an appeal around this bike, and she realised that she had seen this bike, and it was her that rang the 101 number, and that the police call log shows that call was made at 7:12 p.m. on June the 22nd, the day after Noah went missing. So it was Miss Crooks' phone call to the police who alerted the PSNI to that to the possibility that Noah was in that area. So that's at the point that they were brought to that area.
Mm-hmm. And that point came from Donohoe Casey, representing the PSNI. He told Miss Crooks she was the first person to kind of alert police or bring police into that area around Northwood Road. And that's because she had called police after seeing the appeal. She said she had noticed that when she came back from doing some shopping at Tesco, she wasn't driving. She went on Facebook, saw the post about the missing bike, phoned 101. And what Mr. Lunny said is, because of your actions, you brought police to Northwood Road, which then leads to other inquiries that captured the last sighting of Noah. So, Ms. Crooks' evidence is significant because it was the first record the police have of having to go to Northwood Road and that kind of information. She was then asked by Mr. Lunny if she kept the garden gate and side gate locked, and she replied she had 2 dogs. She said they actively kept them closed because the 2 dogs would have wandered. Mr. Lunny then suggested it was likely that Noah would have had to open both the garden gate and the side gate in order to access the Northwood Linear Park in behind.
She also said that she had allowed her children to play in the general vicinity of this culvert, and she did not regard it as dangerous. Now, she was in her house with her father and her 2 sons at the time of Noah's disappearance. She said that her father would have been making dinner. Her father's now passed away, but she said he was never asked whether he saw Noah.
No, and this arose when there were pictures of the area shown to the jury and to the inquest. And in those pictures, it showed a kind of large building at the back of her house with a large window. And she was asked what that building was. And that was an extension put onto the house where what she described was a living room where her father would have gone. He made his dinner in the kitchen area and gone out to the living room, which he did on the night that Noah disappeared. And again, Miss Crooks was asked if he had been asked by police to give a statement. Her father's unfortunately now passed away, but she said that he was never asked to give a statement at that point.
Now, a notebook belonging to a detective sergeant was shown to the inquest. And within those notes, Noah is referred to as a high-functioning autistic teenager. And that's not a diagnosis. That was simply what it was as is presented. That is a notebook belonging to a detective sergeant. Do we have any context for that?
I'll give you some context. This is a notebook that at a point during the search, the investigation was passed on to CID, and this is a notebook belonging to a detective sergeant involved in that investigation. And in those notes, as you say, Noah is referred to as a high-functioning autistic teenager. Now, if we recall, on the first day of or the second day of evidence, when Jay Tierney, that's Noah's friend, gave evidence, Jay Tierney had said that he felt Noah had undiagnosed autism. We don't have any medical records or anything like that at this point, but this, as you say, was simply notes put in a detective's notebook. Those notes also describe a last potential sighting of Noah captured in CCTV, and CCTV that we have not seen. So at this point, this is just notes in the detective's book. He said that footage showed, or the detective said that footage showed Noah crossing a garden in the Northwood Road area. He was naked and heading towards open ground, added the police officer.
And one of the things is, and I realize this might be disturbing for a lot of people, but a number of the witnesses, as you go along, a number of the witnesses say, no, he was clothed or partially clothed, and there was a questionnaire in the local area, and people describe having found items of clothing in the area. And as we go along the evening, slowly but surely, a picture emerges where Noah is described as being naked, and people are very surprised by that.
We've had descriptions of that to date. We've had descriptions of Noah being seen with no top on. One of the witnesses described him as having no top on but couldn't see his bottom half. But again, today we got more conclusive evidence that he had been naked during his time on Northwood Road.
And one witness said, as has been previously seen in the CCTV footage, that this witness saw Miss Kerry Fraser saw who we now know as Noah, totally naked and is sitting down cycling, is how she described it. She said he was totally naked. He was sitting down cycling. I called my partner and we went to the front door. We could see grey shorts with white boxers in them. A few doors down, I could see a jumper over the wall and a pair of trainers placed neatly against the wall. So the clothing seems to have been, apart from his coat, found in this immediate area.
Yeah, these are very, very vivid and very descriptive evidence from Miss Kerry Fraser. Again, we'd heard about the jumper being placed on a wall from previous evidence. Now, this continued on with that. Ms. Fraser didn't live in the Northwood Road area. She was there visiting her partner, who's now her husband, who lived on the street. She was in the front room. They just had dinner, and she was there with her son, and they spotted a figure going past the window. Now, what she said, they were cycling, and she said the word she described them as was totally naked. So she said he was sitting down cycling. She called her partner, and they went to the front door. Now, it was unclear at that point in the evidence how long it was in between that. But when she said when she went out, she could see those grey shorts with white boxers. And a few doors down, that's to her left, heading towards the Shore Road, she said she could see a jumper over the wall and a pair of trainers placed neatly against the wall. And she later in her evidence described them as being placed as if you would go to bed, you would set your trainers down neatly, was the description she gave for that. She then said she could see Noah's bike at the top of the road, close to the cul-de-sac. And she mentioned there were other people at the top of the road talking to people outside a house. She said then the clothes were still there the following day and that she got her son to phone the police after seeing an online appeal.
Now, she was asked whether she thought what she had seen was strange. And what was her response to that?
She was asked a number of times whether she thought what she had seen was strange. She said that she referenced that it was Father's Day, and she thought that maybe someone was drunk. She thought that this could have been a person who was drunk or had taken drugs or was maybe doing a prank or a dare or something like that. She said she couldn't believe it at that point. And, she said, we did think it was somebody maybe drunk. I just thought it was strange, is what she said. And again,
that's just what she said,
mm-hmm.
to be clear to the listener. This is what she said during the inquest today, as she was being cross-examined.
Yeah, for context in that, she would only have got a fleeting glimpse of him. As if you can imagine, you're sitting in a house and someone cycles past the window. It was a fleeting couple of seconds of a glance, but it was enough for her to realise that he was naked and he was cycling. And now she thought it could have been a grown man at that point, because Noah, as we heard, was 5'10", was quite tall for a teenager. So at that point, she maybe thought it was a grown man. And with it being Father's Day, she said she had thought maybe there was some drink or drugs taken. It was a bit of a prank. Someone was cycling home, that kind of thing. And again, she was asked why she didn't call police at that stage, and that's the point she made. She just thought it was strange, but she said with drink or drugs, you wouldn't know what people would do, and she didn't phone the police at that point.
Now, she was asked also about the gap between seeing Noah and her going out on the street, and also there's a reference. There was a reference to a Facebook post made by Miss Fraser during the inquest today. Could you clarify what that was about?
I can, yeah. That Facebook post was made on the 22nd of June, and the reason we know it was on the 22nd of June is because it was provided to police by a third party who had screenshotted the Facebook post. And the reason we know that is because underneath where she had posted, it came up with a little notification that said "just now." So she would have posted that very, very shortly after or before that screenshot was taken, and the time in that was after 8 o'clock, 8:22 p.m. That Facebook post, it gave what she said in evidence. It said that she had seen a boy cycling past naked. She'd gone outside, found his clothes, and then at the end it said she had contacted police. So from that, Ms. Campbell was able to ascertain that she had phoned police before 8:22 p.m. on Monday the 22nd. That post, following that post, Ms. Fraser said she was then contacted by a member of Noah Donohoe's family and asked if she would take that down. Ms. Fraser was also asked in evidence whether she felt that maybe some of the family hadn't heard that information at that point, and what she said was she couldn't be sure of what the family was thinking.
Liam, what we have reported here in this podcast today is what was said in court, and that alone. But some of what we said, we can legitimately report as extraordinary and quite strange. I mean, what was the reaction in court to what we heard today?
I suppose the reaction has varied really on what the evidence is. Anytime there's CCTV played on the screen, there's almost a kind of silence falls on the court. And I mean, the first day that was played, that was very, very clear. I think I said you could hear a pin drop the first day that was shown to the jury. And it's been like that since then, anytime they have the CCTV up. And it's quite often because lawyers are going through it and picking out different parts and asking questions. There is a heavy atmosphere in the room when that's played, and that's, I suppose, understandable when you consider the gravity of what you're dealing with. People are seeing the last movements of a 14-year-old boy whose death at this point they're trying to, find an explanation for through the inquest. So there's that, and then the witnesses who are coming forward. I mean, these are people who have clearly said that they want to help and they want to give what information they have to the inquest. But they're people who maybe haven't been in a courtroom before and they're quite nervous. So you can feel that tension coming from them as well, where they're actively trying to remember things as best they can. And remember, this is
And you don't want to say anything wrong.
Yeah, and it's 6 years ago too. So at points they're having their memory kind of clarified by the lawyers who are using the evidence in front of them to, clarify timings and dates and things like that. So again, 6 years ago, and it can be difficult for people to remember that. And I suppose that's what's helpful, to have the evidence in front of them, and it does help them clarify their memory.
This case continues, this inquest continues on Monday. What is expected to happen on Monday?
Well, what's expected to happen, the first witness we may hear from is the son of Ms. Fraser. Throughout the evidence today, she mentioned that she had phoned police in the company of her son, or she had got him to make the actual phone call itself. So we will hear from him. If not on Monday, it will be next week. But he's probably one of the more key witnesses that we want to hear from next, because he will add to what his mum previously said in her evidence, and it'll give us an even clearer picture of what their perspective was on their sighting of Noah and what action they took on top of that.
Liam Tunney, thank you very much.
Thank you.